Hello, class. This is week number 2 of Ag Issues. So far in this class, we've had a quick introduction to the class, talked about our syllabus, our expectations, but we started getting into some depth on what we're expecting out of this class. We're expecting you to have an understanding of perceptions, paradigms, and paradigm shifts, what these are, and how as a result, we view the world as individuals, right? And we've started a couple of writing assignments. Your first one, you've turned in at this point, writing assignment number 1. That was really just a brief introduction about you and why you are in the field of agriculture. Last Thursday, we started writing assignment number 2, and we spent a little bit of time on Tuesday talking about that. We've talked about issue development in this discussion for assignment 2. And we've spent just a little bit of time talking about what's coming up in this writing assignment number 3. This week, we're going to spend some time talking about APA style, citations for writing a paper, plagiarism, what that means, how it affects us, where this can be an issue at. And we'll dive right into that today. We've spent some time, like I said, talking about assignment 2 on Tuesday. So let's hop right in. All right. So we've talked a little bit so far about what we've done in the class to date and what we're doing today. So let's dive right into it. Today, we're going to spend some time on APA format and on plagiarism, all in one. Let's hop right in. What is APA? APA stands for the American Psychological Association format style. Now, this, as you might have guessed, is most commonly used within the social sciences to cite sources, to provide evidence for the claims that we're making. But it's expanded beyond the social sciences, and it's become more routine to use in the fields like agricultural sciences or with policy making, which is in some ways a part of this class when we talk about agricultural policies that farmers need to follow in order to remain in business. And with this APA style, we're offered some ways of having in-text citations. These are where we attach this source, this reference to what we're claiming, what we're trying to back up within the body of the text. And we can do this in 2 ways. We can do this as part of a formal sentence structure. Aschenbrenner and Dodson, 2009, found students from California State University, Chico, spent an average of 3 hours of homework, 3 hours on homework each night. So that's when we have it as part of the sentence structure. When we bring the citation in, and we'll talk later on about why this is written the way it is, we can also put it outside of the sentence structure. We can say that students from California State University, Chico, spent an average of 3 hours on homework each night. Aschenbrenner and Dodson, 2009. These are 2 acceptable ways of citing, and the way that we choose to use it is often stylistically, right? That's going to depend on what you're writing, how that fits into the body of the whole paragraph, and is going to be left up to you. But we can cite with these 2 ways, part of the formal sentence structure, like we saw up top, and outside of that sentence. But we're still backing up this claim that California State University Chico students spent an average of 3 hours on homework each night. That's not something that we just say and don't provide evidence for. There is a whole study done on that, right? So we can back it up by citing the study. So with these in-text citations, we have this question now. What do we do with the number of authors? And there are some formal rules for this. this presentation will be uploaded as a PowerPoint file, as a PDF file, and you'll see this in the video that you're currently watching. So take your time going through this. Make sure you have an understanding. You will lose points for this in the future, starting with homework assignment number 3, if you don't follow APA citation style correctly. So if you have 2 authors, we use both author names every time, Aschenbrenner and Dodson. If there are 3 to 5 authors, we use all of the names the first time when we cite the source, and shorten it using et al, meaning and others. It's an abbreviation from Latin when we go back to cite that source in the future. So the first time we go through, if we have 3 authors, Aschenbrenner, Dodson, and Spies, 2016, when we cite this, the first time it shows up in our paragraph, in our paper, in our writing assignment, we write all 3 of these author names out. Now, if we have this in one paragraph and we use this good reference here, great, that's how we write it out. Now, if we want to cite that paper 1 more time, or 2 more times, or 5 more times in our paper, we're going to shorten that to the first author's name, the first author's surname, Aschenbrenner et al. Aschenbrenner, and then we're going to add the et al, meaning and others, and then provide the year of publication, 2016. That's going to be for the 2nd time, the 3rd time, the 5th time, so forth, right? So again, listing all the names when we have 3 to 5 authors the first time, and then the 2nd time, if we're going to cite that source again, first author's name, et al, and then the year. If there are 6 authors or more, you'll see some papers, especially in genetics and physics, especially in physics, where you have 100 author names. Do not list all of the author names. If there are 6 or more authors, use the first author's surname and et al, followed by the year, the first time, the 2nd time, the 5th time, the 20th time that you cite that source in a paper. So this could be Smith, Johnson, Brazier, I don't know, list 20 more authors on there. Do not write all of those last names out. Instead, write Smith et al every time if there are 6 or more authors. Now, when we go to third-party information, we can do that. We want to try to avoid looking up secondary sources. These are sources that reference a primary source, the initial work, right? And we're going to try to avoid these. We want you to go directly to that primary source if possible. So you see in this particular example, we could say Dodson, as cited in Doyle and Johnson. This is our secondary source. This is our primary source, Dodson, secondary Doyle and Johnson. Identified 4 factors, ... right? Yeah, we can cite Doyle and Johnson, but if they're pulling this information from Dodson, then we should go straight to the Dodson source and use that as our in-text citation, our way of backing up what we're doing. Instead of going through a game of telephone, right, we're going straight to the person that did this work. Now, we can also work on personal communication. You know, honestly, for this class, you'd have to have a really good excuse to cite personal communication. You know, in previous classes, people have cited personal communication with the instructor or with another professor that is really into this sort of work. But, you know, that information isn't recoverable. We can't back that up other than calling up that professor and say, hey, you know, where did this information come from? And they say, oh, you know, just I observed it one day. Well, that's fine, but we want to avoid that. That's not as strong of a reference. It's not as as powerful or meaningful of a source, as something that was observed by that individual and then backed up through peer review, through statistics, and so forth, right? If you were to do this sort of citation, which I don't expect to see much of, as a heads up, if I see too much of this, you'll lose points. Citing the author B.F. Skinner, personal communication, then give the date, February 12th, 1978, claimed that, I don't know, the spotted stickleback fish was only observed in Tennessee waterways, right? That's not the case, right? That's not something that we could look through the scientific literature and prove otherwise, right? And that's why this is dangerous, and is often more likely to give us false information or incomplete information than going straight to a published peer-reviewed source. Okay. What about a web document? This we'll see more of than I'd like to see in this class. Everyone likes their web documents. Use the author date format. So following that same style, in this case we have two authors, Dengelman and Harris, 2000, provided guidance for the use of APA writing style. If there's no date, use the abbreviation ND in place of the date. If there are no authors, use the first few words of the title in place of the author. In this case, changes in Americans' views of gender status differences have been documented. And we could just say gender in society. And in this case, maybe there's no date, so we say ND. And we'll be able to follow where the source came from later on in the document. We'll get there soon enough. I haven't seen on this presentation, I think I forgot to say for a single author. We've seen this example already. But if Smith is the only author, you just say Smith and year. In this case, Dodson and year is what we would use here. Or Skinner and then the year. Okay, what about a Bible source? Well, we typically get a Bible quote in one paper per year. But to cite the Bible, provide the book, chapter, and verse. If you don't know what that means, you probably shouldn't cite the Bible. The first time that the Bible is cited in text, you need to identify the version used. And if you're citing the Bible, odds should be very high that you're sticking with the same version throughout. If you're not, then you probably shouldn't be citing the Bible. You are forgiving and good, O Lord, abound in love to all who call to you, right? We got the book, chapter, verse, and the version of the Bible used for the citation. To enter this in your reference list, again, this reference list we'll get to in a little bit, there is no entry required for the Bible in your reference list. Okay, quotations. When a direct quote is used, always include the author, year, and page number as part of a citation. A quotation of fewer than 40 words should be enclosed in double quotation marks and should be incorporated into the formal structure of the sentence. We see this example laid out here. I will say that I would advise using very few of these whole quotes in any paper that you write. You should paraphrase findings as often as possible, summarize, put in your own words. When you have these quotes, these in-text quotations are really meant to be powerful and impactful, something that you're saying, look, this is a really important part of this work. We're quoting this to add emphasis to its value. And if you do a lot of that, if you do say more than 1 or 2 quotes on a 10-page assignment, that's really detracting from that. It makes me question whether or not you should be having these as quoted materials in there. And probably won't get full points for that, right? You'll see a comment if you've got 5 or 6 of these in a 10-page paper. In this case, it's a single author, Bird, 1988. Suggests less cognitive heart failure, ... right? This is the end sentence structure, like we talked about earlier on. This is the outside of that end text version, right? When we're going beyond that. In parentheses, Bird, 1988. You can put page 829 since we're talking about this direct quote. Okay. Lengthier quotations of 40 or more words should appear without quotation marks, apart from the surrounding text in a block format, with each line indented 5 spaces from the left margin. Again, you shouldn't be citing a whole, 100, 200 page text in most of these papers, but this is for you to know for future reference, right? We've seen these in magazine articles where we have this separate block of text that we go back to and are able to see. Again, this needs to have a lot of value with the way that it's written, that exact word from that source, for it to be in this sort of format. Okay, we've talked about those in-text citations. Now let's talk about the references. The references allow us to go from those in-text citations to the actual source, and these show up at the end of our documents. We would see something like for journal articles. Mrzinski and Dengelman, 1996. Notice that this is in parentheses. We've got periods here. First name initial with a period, first name initial, period, comma, right? Capital B, lowercase l. You'll see this show up in a few different ways depending on the citation format, but let's stick with lowercase the rest of this, unless otherwise required. Body language of women and judgments of vulnerability to sexual assault. Then we see in italics the journal that this was published in. This is in the Journal of Applied Social Psychology, issue 26, page numbers 1617 through 1626. This should show up as written in this sort of format at the end of your document in the references section. And this is for journal articles. Now we can look at it from the context of a book, right? Author name, year. In this case, we have the title of the book, which edition the book is in, and the publisher. When we go to that references section of our document, for web documents on a university program or on a department website, we would do author names, 1 through however many authors, the year. Remember, if we don't have a date for the year, no date. And if we don't have author names, having that description in italics, that same thing that showed up in text should show up at the end here. This is how we track the in-text citations and take it from that to its source. Whoops. APA style essentials, the date that you retrieved it, from which school or university or source, and then providing a link to that page. A standalone web document with no date. We talked a little bit about what that should look like already, right? Author name. We don't have a publication date from that standalone web document. Title of that, retrieval date, and link. We talked a little bit about this already, right? Gender and society, no date. So this is in place of an author. When we don't have an author, we don't have a date available to us. Retrieval date from such and such website. When we go to a journal article from a database, and this is something that we'll see at some point in this time with the ag librarian at Chico State. She'll show us some databases that we can use to find these sources. I prefer to use something called Google Scholar, scholar.google.com. Chico State Library has a lot of databases that you can dig through. But when we go to retrieve these articles from a database, author names, author or publication year, Title, a closer look at the drug abuse, maternal aggression link. Journal name, publication version, issue, page numbers, and retrieval date from a database. ProQuest is another common one that people use, like Google Scholar, to search. Abstract from a secondary database. It follows that same format. Author name, year, title, journal, issue, page, retrieval date, and from that database, following that same format as that primary, or from the journal article from a database. This is the abstract from. Avoid citing abstracts. Abstracts are generally just summaries that don't necessarily go through the same process of peer review. Internet journals, again, following that same format, providing a link. You can add a DOI number if those are available at the end. This is the DOI number that I was referring to. DOIs are becoming more and more common for journal articles and web journals. In fact, it's almost required. If there's no DOI number, it's probably something that you should ask, why doesn't it have a DOI number, and decide if it's maybe not quite as worth citing. A DOI, it's this unique set of alphanumeric strings assigned to identify the content and provide this persistent link to its location on the internet. These values are associated with the journal, in this case, memory and cognition. It usually has an issue number nested in there, a page number, and publication year information nested within this very scary looking number. Online newspaper articles are also fair game to cite and can be very, very informative if used well. Author name, publication, year and date. Prairie farmers reap conservation's rewards in the New York Times, right? The title of that article, the Times, the publication itself, and retrieved from the New York Times, right? Putting that link to the website on there. We can cite technical reports. You can see this a lot of times, say with a lot of water sciences, you see technical reports, or with the NRCS, the US Department of Agriculture. They'll all have these technical reports that they write up, and they don't get published in peer-reviewed journals, but they are very, very valuable. This could be, for instance, we have Hershey's Food listed, publication year and date, the 2001 annual report. You'll see a lot of year annual reports out there. And there are a lot of these available through nonprofits, through for-profit companies, through governmental organizations. But make sure you provide that link. Really important to do that. And if we have a website with no author or date of publication, we follow that exact same format as we do with other no date and no author references. Census data revisited, no date, retrieved from, and a link. We can also provide a reference for a citation for an article of a chapter in a book, right? And these books are published with a lot of really good information. Again, we have the author date and the year. If this were to show up in text, you'd see Shea, 1992. And then that takes us to this references section, which has the author name, the year, religion and sexual adjustment, in this book, whatever edition, this chapter in this book, through these pages in this publisher. It gets a little bit tricky. As a heads up, when you're doing these in-text citations, go back to this video or these slides and take some time to understand what you're citing, why you're citing it, and how it should be cited, both in text and in the references, because it gets confusing to everybody, right? It takes some time to get used to this sort of writing style, this writing format. In-text citations for court cases, we'll use the name in italics, the case name, plus the date. Griswold versus Connecticut, classic, 1965. In our reference list, we have name versus name, legal citation, in the issuing court abbreviation and year. So People versus Stockton Pregnancy Control Medical Clinic. 203 Cal, right? That whole list, we're making sure that we have that legal citation with the issuing court abbreviation and the year. And these can be a little tricky to cite, but they can be very important for a lot of the work that you're going to be doing in this class. Same with statutes, following a very similar format. Okay, so your papers, when you write them, starting with homework 3, should have a title page. On this title page, you'll have a running header, and note you do not write running head. Cross that part off. Your running header could be effects of blah, right? Whatever that running header is that is going to be on every page of your paper, going on each page that summarizes what this paper is about. The effects of humanization on the perceived welfare of stigmatized outgroups and empathetic motivation. Your name goes here. And then in this case, we're writing California State University, Chico. That's where this is being written at, what it's being written for. So the title of your paper, your name, CSU Chico. And again, all of your pages, running header. It's going to be really important. Notice up here we have a page number. Page number 1, next one should be page number 2. You should still see that running header up there. Your title is centered, aligned. Running header and is capitalized. This header length should be less than 50 characters. Title should be in this upper portion of the page, not down here, not in the middle, upper portion. Name and institution, assignment and date. You know, and this is the term paper example that we have here. You know, for say homework 3, maybe write the assignment name there. In this case, I wouldn't worry about the date. You can write the instructor. You know, you can write it. In this case, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I know who I am. We already talked about the page number. And make sure that your title is appropriate for the topic. Don't have a title about water policy and then have a paper about animal welfare, right? Make sure that they all follow a reasonable structure, right? Make sure that this title is descriptive and in a lot of ways a summary, letting me know what I'm expecting from your paper. Now, when we're talking about this manuscript, you see that we have the title at the top, centered at the top of the manuscript's body. And this is at the first page of that paper, right? This first page that counts towards the overall page requirement. So we have that running header up here, all caps, page number, title, and then we hop right into this paper. And we see in this paper, we've got these in-text citations. Batson, 1991. This is part of that very first citation for as part of the formal sentence structure. And we also see a different citation from Batson. This is 1997 instead of 1991. And he's also accompanied by 6 or more authors, right? So we see Batson et al., Batson and others. And since it's et al., and we don't see 1997 Batson anywhere else up here, it's safe to assume that there are at least 6 other authors, at least 5 other authors, right? When we're talking about 6 or more, Batson plus 5. We see a citation for 2 authors here, the same citation here, right? So this is what your paper should look like. We should have sources that back up claims that support your arguments. And you can use that as part of that formal sentence structure, like we see for Batson 1991, or something removed from the sentence structure. It shows up at the end of the sentence. Emotional responses have been found to be more likely if the person in need is not believed to be responsible for their condition, and if they are directed at individuals rather than entire groups. So we make this claim, right? Now we're supporting it, and we're supporting it with this removed citation at the end of that sentence. We see that these single quotes show up, parenthesis, author et al., comma, year, end parenthesis, then period. The references, we have hanging references here. So this first line is at that, at that 1-inch mark. Author names, year, title of their paper. We see there's another capitalization here because it's following that colon. Journal of personality, issue, page number, DOI, but we see that these other lines, they're hanging, they're indented. Take some time to figure out how to have this format set up. It's a little bit tricky. This is what I'm expecting to see in your paper. When you have, for these first few homework assignments, 1, 2, or 3 citations, this is what I'm expecting to see at the very end of your assignment, right? These authors listed here. Okay, that's it for this portion. We're going to hop into homework 3 now. Okay, so we're going to talk about writing assignment 2 real quick. We've talked about that a little bit on February 2nd. This is just a reminder that writing assignment 2 is due on February 4th. That's presumably the day that you're watching this video. Again, we talked about February 2 in that synchronous class that we had on February 2nd. But we're beginning now writing assignment number 3. And this is the part where it starts speeding up a little bit. We're going to be working a lot of these writing assignments and things like that over the next few weeks. Hopefully, at this point, your copy of Agricultural and Food Controversies has arrived. You have that on hand. Mine only took about 5 days to get here in the mail. You will need this starting next week. If you see, again, on that class schedule, something about read a certain chapter in the Agricultural and Food Controversies book, there will be a quiz. So you'll need the book. And the book quizzes are open note, but we'll get to that starting next week, February 9th. For now, though, let's start writing assignment 3. Writing assignment 3 is going to be due February 11th. Again, that's probably next Thursday, depending on where you're watching or when you're watching this. It's got 2 parts to it. It's got part 1, which is a little bit of background research. This is a 5-point portion of this writing assignment. You're going to choose one of our issue categories, okay? And in these issue categories, you're going to conduct research on a specific issue within that category. So you get to choose. In one sentence, I want you to describe your specific topic. For example, this one sentence. I am researching how the 2019 trade war between the United States and China has affected markets for American soybean. And then I want you to identify 3 reliable sources concerning your specific issue, providing that citation in the APA format for each source that we just covered. These issue categories are at the bottom of the page for writing assignment number 3. Water, agricultural trade, soil health, climate change, GMOs, land use, small versus large scale farming, animal wellness, grazing issues, or another issue that you think is worth tackling, as long as it's relevant to this class. Okay, so this part's pretty easy, right? 1 sentence, 3 sources, APA format, no problem. Second part is doing an article analysis. I want you to write a 2 or 4 page analysis of 2 of those 3 sources that you just provided. Your analysis should include what each source argues, what's its main claim, right? How each argument is made, what are its major subclaims, what kind of evidence does it use to persuade its audience, and what or why its argument matters in a broader context and to a broader audience. Why is the argument socially relevant or significant? Now, your paragraphs, each of these paragraphs that we have laid out here for each of these points should be about 1 paragraph per point, per source, right? That means your paper should be about 6 paragraphs long. And it must include your reference list in APA format, and your APA citations should appear in text in these paragraphs. If you want to build off those and go with more sources, that's fine. You won't get more points for it though. Include that reference list in APA format. That should look a lot like what you wrote up here, but at the end of part 2. And I want to have these papers submitted by midnight on February 11th. In truth, I made it due February 12th at midnight, but that's just because I was feeling nice. Please get these in on time. If you need extra time, email me, but we're trying to keep up with this class. If you fall behind now, it's going to create some bigger problems for you in the future. Okay, with that, this is your 3rd writing assignment. Spend some time on this. It's a lot of work, but I hope that you find it enjoyable, right? I wasn't always a very good writer. I'd argue that I'm still not a very good writer. My strength is doing the scientific writing, less so the persuasive writing. But it takes practice, and that's what we're going to get a lot of in this class. Practice writing, practice applying and using APA format, getting those reference lists set up. It'll be really helpful to you. And I think you'll find that using reliable sources can be harder to do than you think. And it, at the end of the day, I'm the judge of that. That's the grader, right? Which source is reliable, which isn't. Next week, we have a asynchronous class on February 9th. I'm going to have you watch a video. It's called Unbroken Ground, and I want you to be prepared to discuss it on our class, the Thursday class, which is synchronous on February 11th. We're going to do a little bit of peer review for writing assignment number 3. Get writing assignment 3 turned in on February 11th. And we are going to begin looking at writing assignment number 4. Writing assignment number 4 is a pretty big one. It'll be due in a week and a half after assignment. Writing assignment number 4 will be due February 23rd. So you'll have some time. Don't worry too much. And I will see you all next week. Thank you.